Hey everybody, I'm John Rourke, editor-in-chief of Phoenix Home and Garden magazine, and we're here this morning chatting with 2023 Masters of the Southwest inductee, Craig Wickersham. Architecture, interior design, furniture design, illustration, fine art. Yeah, I bet you even know how to juggle.
I do. I know all those things. Yes.
Would. So
I was born in the 1200s, so it's one of those things you pick it up.
One of those skills that you had to have. So you're known for your architecture.
Yep.
Child prodigy is a term
term.
you've probably heard before.
Yeah.
But so your first house, if I understand correctly, was permitted and built when you were 14. Is that correct?
It wasn't actually my first house. My first house I did when I was 13. We got a permit on that one. But it was more of a fantasy project, and my tutor at the time walked me through the whole process. So from start to finish, not napkin stuff, full-size drawings,
right?
Permits, meaning I did plumbing, electric, the whole house, everything, structural, everything. Long process. And then my father's friend got wind of it, and he was building a community and said, I want a house. So the very first house I did was for him, a friend of my father's. And again, these are not silverleaf homes. These are more common, practical homes.
but you were 13, 14. Amazing, yeah. And then skip ahead a little bit. Tell us about Taliesin West.
Yeah, Taliesin was wonderful. So coming to Arizona, the attraction to Arizona is Frank Lloyd Wright and the history of Frank Lloyd Wright. And coming from California, where I grew up in the Monterey Bay area, there was a Frank Lloyd Wright home in Carmel, which just recently sold for some astronomical fee, based on it's a 1,200 square foot house. Anyway, the attraction was always there. So as soon as I came to Arizona, still in high school, and working here in town with various firms, I would go up to Taliesin and make friends with everybody, and eventually was at a point where I graduated high school and went up to Taliesin, and Mrs. Wright had me come right in and just started going. And fortunately for them, I had a background and was able to produce income for the firm in a different way than a lot of the students who generally don't know anything when they arrive.
Interesting.
So I was able to help people learn as well as make some money for the school.
Exactly.
Essentially, it's a firm that's practicing a school as well. Well, I don't know if it's still a school anymore.
And then you actually lived in one of those student structures out in the desert, so talk about that.
You're required to cast away, as a monk might do, everything that you consider familiar.
Right.
So we would keep our clothes in a men's locker room. The women and men were separated at that point by nature. But the trail at night with no electricity out to the desert, of course, could be treacherous. So we would carry a little flashlight, and we would find our tent, and they were tetrahedron tents, traditional. There's sites there in 1930s that are identical to what we would build and live in. I built my own tent base, because that's fun, right? To build something. And elevated the tent up off the ground a little bit so you can stand up in it, those kinds of things. So a lot of fun, and eventually you build more and more and more. And the idea, if you already know this, of course, is learning by doing. So the whole process of Taliesin is very immersive.
And so you ended up building your own structure?
Yeah, and we, again, not only there, but we built a building at Taliesin. So there's generally a project that everybody's working on during the course of your time there, whether it's maintaining existing buildings, which we were all kind of assigned those tasks. And there was a student lounge, Wendell Burnett, who was there at the time and is a master of the Southwest. He and I were building that project with several others who I don't know if they are in Arizona anymore, but I do know that Wendell and I still are.
Right.
Fun.
And I would think living in the desert like that, you're learning about the light, you're learning about the elements. What were the big takeaways?
Yeah, so I think the largest takeaway is there's no such thing as a snake-proof anything.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing I think Mr. Wright was trying to instill in people is what is the essential necessity really for a residence or a home or a structure or something. And when you're living out in a very crude environment, similar to what someone might live in the 1700s if they were Native American, apart from we had running water, we did have at the main building electricity, but when they first built those buildings, they did not.
Right.
And it was very much like the 1850s and 1880s kind of concept. And yet, if you've seen the buildings, very aggressive in terms of forward thinking.
Right.
So it wasn't a log cabin. And so what we learn is what's appropriate. What's appropriate for the desert? And we lived in a lot of other places, of course, Wisconsin and in various parts of the world that I've lived in. They each have their own climate. They each have their own nature,
right,
as Mr. Wright would say. So you have to learn, oh, gee, there's a lot of wind coming across this place. We got to design for that. And
right. Architecture is never one size fits all.
Yes, and it's appropriateness. So, of course, I'll go off on a bunny trail, but, he wrote The Genius and the Mobocracy talking about this very same topic of why are we building Victorian houses in the United States of America in the 1900s when we should be really building American architecture. And that was his real kind of bone to pick with the American Architectural Society his whole life.
Right.
Was why aren't we building an American architecture? Why do you keep copying it? So,
right, exactly.
So that's part of the process we go through at Taliesin, and something I kind of walk my clients through this. It could be something unique to you.
Right.
And appropriate to the site.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so Taliesin, then jump ahead. When did you form your own firm?
Well, technically I've always had my own company because of how I operate. And so I was working, left Taliesin, was working with Allen and Philp Architects again. And Mark Philp, a great and wonderful man, great architect. And Ken Allen, his partner, was an excellent businessman. And they could never afford me all the way. So they would allow me to have my business and other clients as well as working for them. And then I gradually was with Swabeck Partners.
Right.
I was with Bob Bacon for a while. And there was a period of time when I was working with Mr. Keating and brought into that firm, which was more of a real estate development company.
Right.
But it still was a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah, design. I mean, I'm a design guy, so I don't care what I'm designing if it's fun.
Right, exactly.
Even if it's a castle, I'll do it.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Which leads me to you're known for contemporary homes.
Yes.
But you are by no means limited to that.
Yeah, I mean, we do sit down with clients who, in our business, I think a lot of architects come in categories. The main category would be service-based. And from that also outshoots the I will use your money for my agenda-based star architects, because there's a lot of those, Frank Gehry and architects that want to make a name for themselves, technically using their clients' money for their own agenda. And then there's people like myself who, I just listen to what you want and give you what you want. I don't care if you want a castle or you want a Spanish hacienda. I'm going to make it a great one. Is my passion castles? Ooh, yes, it is. I mean, I love all architecture. I love going to Europe and seeing wonderful buildings. I just love it all.
Right.
But what's appropriate to Arizona has a certain reality to it,
Exactly.
Big views, wonderful.
Amazing views. And then, so you have clients elsewhere as well. So does that give you do you like that variety of having different different terrain, different climates, different everything?
Yeah.
Because it flexes those different muscles?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. We're constantly, I've done work all over the world in different countries, and they all have context. Mm-hmm. And you have to really think about the context because it would be real easy to piss a lot of people off, and which Mr. Wright didn't care. He was using, his agenda for his architecture, and rightly so. Whereas I'm a little more timid. I don't want to piss a lot of people off. I want to make it work for the community that it's in.
Exactly right.
There's appropriateness there.
Exactly.
I laugh because so many stories we could talk about.
Sure. Are there projects that what would be like the dream project for you here in Arizona?
Oh, I have several going right now.
Sure.
Where we have a client whose faith, trust, enthusiasm, the things that they bring, which tells you right away the passion and respect that they have for what's happening. The contrast to that is really obvious. There's some people that they don't care. And we get some of those clients, and they don't care. They get ordinary. When you sit down with someone who has passion about every aspect, I get emotional because it really is rare, but it elevates the whole process.
Oh, it's got to.
You can do that? Yes, I can design a custom sink and I'll cast it in bronze, and I do those kinds of projects. Or, yes, we can design the sculptures, the artwork, the paintings, the whatever. You tell me what you want to do, and I'll do it.
Right.
That's... we've got a couple clients like that, and we're like, oh my God, this is just wonderful. And when you're capable, and there's a few colleagues in our group that we both know that are like that. Right. And you guys recognize those architects, and they're more than architects. They're just great people who listen. Exactly. And give those individuals something excellent.
Exactly. Yeah. And that passion that you have and that they have shows in their work. So
yeah, it does.
Makes all the difference.
And there's a lot of secret stuff that kind of goes in behind the scenes that we rarely ever talk about. And probably that's a good thing. But the realities are we live in a great climate that attracts a lot of wealthy people, and therefore there's opportunities to abuse that. I do think of projects, without naming them specifically, where there's a lot of abuse of wealth for the sake of, and sadly, the end product in 5-10 years is, we just got recently hired to tear one of them down. It's sad because you spent $14 million on a project, and now I'm going to gut it and turn it to start over. The profession that we're in is about listening and communicating. Yeah. So when we sit down with a person who wants to do something, I, as an architect, it's my duty to kind of find out if we're getting on the same page. And part of that's a language. We speak English or we speak a certain language, but when someone says to me they like a contemporary home, what does that mean? Right. What does that mean? For me, is completely different than what it means for you and Sally and George and all these different people, right? So we have to define that. And part of that, as a young child, in my pre-teens and teens, is drawing. Right. You draw an idea, you draw a perspective or a sketch or a simple 1,000 words in a drawing moment, and people meet, and I still do that. Because clients communicate with me from their perspective, and when they tell me, I want open, fresh, light, that could mean 100 things to Salvador Dali. Right. Certainly, when I think of that, I have to kind of clean that out and really narrow it into a bandwidth that we can afford. Otherwise, you're all over the place. Right. Yeah. Okay. And that's done through drawing. So I do a lot of drawings. Bam, bam, bam. Okay,
and speaking of your drawings, you have got an Instagram account with these crazy drawings, which gives a whole nother glimpse into your brain.
Yes, well, I just had that conversation with another person today, called me and was talking about this, and they said, talk to me about the architecture process, and I said, well, it takes about 3 years to fulfill myself. And so on the weekends, I have to do something that takes 3 hours. Right. Oh, so that's where these drawings come out, and the Instagram stuff is really about Because drawings for a house, relatively speaking, take a long time.
Sure.
And to get to a point of fulfillment can take 5 years sometimes on a project.
Okay.
And so, you've got to get something out.
Okay. Yeah. And those drawings are I don't even know how to describe them because they're anatomical. I mean, there are a lot of heads and faces and crazy things going on, and very imaginative.
Yeah. That's my again. The exact opposite of architecture is why do we build architecture in the first place? Right. So I think of the Greeks and the Romans, and then further back the stuff in Turkey that's 12,000 years old with animals carved on live rock, and you go, why did they do that? And then you look at the mythology and the language, and you're like, these people are really creative. We were extremely creative 12,000 years ago, and that's always intrigued me. So I love the Greek mythology, and Medusa is what I've been spending a lot of time recently in the last 5 years, but oh my God, there's so much more.
Right, exactly.
How do you keep it going?
So they do have kind of a mythological...
Well, I always think about particularly Medusa in the perspective of the Greeks. I mean, they were discovering these mythological characters as though they had existed long before they did. So they probably exist today in our mind's mythology. These are characters that we keep reinventing in modern media. You see movies made about Dracula today, or movies made about Circe, or other mythological characters. Well, I like that. What is it like to see one of these characters in today's society? So some of my drawings are Medusa as a child with a cell phone.
Right, exactly, yeah. So yeah, if you haven't seen Craig's drawings on his Instagram account, definitely take a look at them. It gives you an entirely new perspective on an architect. What's happening? What's next for you?
Well, that's a good thing. I've got some really amazing projects with amazing people, as I described. And next for me is architecture is always a long process. Mr. Wright call it the mother art. So it encompasses everything. I've got a lot of landscape work I'm doing on a project where I'm actually out on the site, locating the boulders, and I'm working with one of our masters of the Southwest on that project as well. And so just, it's the same, passion. I look forward to, this looks like a great project because of the property, the people, the views, everything.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, I could talk to you for the entire afternoon.
Weeks and months.
Exactly. But I know you have other irons in the fire. Thank you for your time today. Thank you. Congratulations on the Masters of the Southwest designation. Long overdue, but it was our honor to honor you in that way. And again, we're here with Craig Wickersham, architect and Renaissance man, raconteur, wearing all the hats and then some. He's featured in our February-March issue, which is on newsstands now. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.